My name is Joe. These are just opinions. I am Joepinionated. I'm excited to do the first Joepinionated List movie edition. Top 10 Stanley Kubrick movies of all time. He was raised in Manhattan. His dad was a physician. His mom was a good mom. He had a good family. He was a smart kid. He didn't do that well in school, but they all knew he was wicked smart. Became a chess master. His dad bought him a camera for his 13th birthday. When he was 16, he took this photo over my shoulder. That's a pretty famous photo. He sold it to Look magazine, got a contract with Look magazine as a photographer, ended up working his way into films. Stanley Kubrick, in my opinion, is the greatest motion picture director of all time. That's a pretty common answer to that question. It's not just about the perfection of each film. Stanley's a master of creating alternate realities. When you step into a storybook, into a fiction, there can be little changes, little tweaks made to reality. It can be intriguing, mesmerizing, and Stanley did a lot of this through cinematography and attention to detail. A lighting master, and he was quite possibly the greatest film director of all time. Tell me when it's better. If I had to guess that one human being in the history of the last 100 years was an alien, I put my money on Stanley Kubrick. I had somebody give me the Stanley Kubrick collection. It's been one of the best things I've ever owned. Basically, this list starts around Spartacus. He stepped into a movie that was partially done and directed some big-time Hollywood actors, earned his freedom, his creative freedom. It's not really a Stanley Kubrick movie, and I don't think that Stanley Kubrick likes the movie. Okay, so top 10 Stanley Kubrick movies, Joepinionated List. Number 10, what you need to watch is this one. Stanley Kubrick, A Life in Pictures. Documentary made after Stanley's passing. So Stanley was born July 26th. 1928 in New York City, and he passed away on March the 7th, 1999. This is a history of Stanley Kubrick's life and a breakdown of each movie. It's a must watch. My kids will tell you. What he can do to make people work for him is just insane. And the way that he treats life like a chess game in so many different situations. Sorry, I gotta stop clicking this thing. Treats every picture with so much attention and detail. It's just incredible. Number 10, Stanley Kubrick, A Life in Pictures. At number 9, all-time Joepinionated List, greatest Stanley Kubrick movies. The 1987 Stanley Kubrick Vietnam picture, Full Metal Jacket. Yeah, there's a Private Joker there. This is a good movie. It just doesn't work for me. So one thing with Stanley Kubrick movies a lot of times is he's putting together some stories and sometimes they don't quite line up. Number 9, all-time Joepinionated List, I've got Full Metal Jacket. Sergeant Hartman is the character's name. And the guy was an actual drill sergeant, kind of depressing some parts of it. For me, Full Metal Jacket just doesn't work. Number 8, all-time Joepinionated List, I have the 1957 classic from Stanley Kubrick, and a lot of people might have this one higher, but I have it here, number 8 all-time, Paths of Glory. Kirk Douglas has an incredible role in this movie. There's lots of incredible acting. I just think about the shots or following the guys through the trenches. I've got it here. It's just because the other ones are even better. I like watching it if I'm not feeling good, like I'm sick, I'll watch Paths of Glory. Does that make any sense? No. Number 7, all-time Joepinionated List, Stanley Kubrick's last movie, and possibly unfinished. Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman, starring in Eyes Wide Shut. Now, this is where things get kind of crazy for me because, honestly, right at this point is when I absolutely love everything going forward. Another kind of gap in the story. It's very good. It kind of reminds me of David Lynch. There's sort of some odd, strange stuff going on. Whether you see the movie as being dark or hopeful, it can be different one time from the next. I found that with Wes Anderson's Royal Tenenbaums. One day you watch it and it's hilarious. The next day you watch it, it's depressing. This movie's got a bit of that going on too. Okay, in 1962, Stanley Kubrick basically kicked off his freedom to do whatever the hell he wants career after making Spartacus. First one he decided to take on was based off a classic book, Lolita. It's a movie about a guy that falls in love with a teenager. It's a clever movie, it's a fiction, and like I mentioned before, there's sort of like this alternate sort of universe going on in his movies where it's okay to observe what's going on your television. if that makes any sense. And I'm not defending in any way, shape, or form the conduct of this bad dude. It's a movie. He's doing his own thing. He has control. Now it's time to take no prisoners. Lolita. Number 6 all-time Joepinionated List greatest Stanley Kubrick movies. It's got Peter Sellers playing a few different characters. I forget how many characters he played in this one. Peter Sellers, he's amazing in these Stanley Kubrick movies. Some of the best acting ever. He was the Pink Panther. I recently saw him on that Beatles, the awesome documentary Peter Jackson did. Just, like show up at the studios while they're recording Let It Be. Number 5 all-time Joepinionated List. I'm going with 1975's masterpiece, Barry Lyndon. He famously got a lens from NASA, this monster lens, and he mounted it to this crazy camera. I'm not going to pretend like I know what I'm talking about. He shot the whole thing, candlelight inside, and then outside he'd have these big, broad landscape shots. He would flatten the image out just because of this, using this large lens, so that everything almost looked like a moving painting. One of the most beautiful movies of all time. Well shot, just ridiculous. And then you have a very amusing, hilarious story about this dude, Barry Lyndon. It's just a story about this guy, but it's so nice to see. It's just not super fake. The duel scenes, just the way it's all shot, I love every second of this movie. The criticism is that it's boring. You've got to want to watch it. And so that's why I usually suggest the whole Life in Pictures documentary about Stanley first. Number 5. Barry Lyndon. It's awesome listening to Jack Nicholson say that everybody pretty much acknowledges that he's the man, Stanley Kubrick, and that underrates him. But number 4 all-time Stanley Kubrick movies, The Shining. Masterclass in acting. And if you watch the making of this movie, a masterclass in this guy, Stanley Kubrick, getting the most out of everybody. He was driving Shelley Duvall so crazy that she was her authenticity when she's scared running down the hallways and stuff like that's just caused partially by Stanley Kubrick stressing her out. And then watching Jack Nicholson prepare for his role in the making of it, when he's doing the hallway act scene, they show him getting ready in the hotel room beforehand and brushing his teeth, and then as he's walking down the hallway, just finally getting into character just before he gets there. This scene right here, that's in the making of The Shining. Based on a Stephen King book, I think they butted heads. I mean, the book is way different than the movie. It is just one of the best movies ever made, and it could be easily the best movie for a number of directors. That can scare the socks off you. I know I've seen it happen to a few people. Sorry to my nephew. I think he gets younger every time he tells the story. I'm not sure how old he was. Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, Joepinionated List, number 4. So number 3 on the Joepinionated List of greatest Stanley Kubrick movies of all time, I'm going with his 1964 greatest satire possibly ever. One of the funniest movies ever made. One of the cleverest movies ever made. One of the best acting ensembles. I mean, this thing should have won every single award at the Academy Award that year, but that just goes to show the Academy Awards are garbage compared to the Joepinionated List. Come on, let's get real. Dr. Strangelove is number 3 on all-time Joepinionated List. Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Back to Peter Sellers. So this is the movie right after Lolita, 2 years after Lolita. Peter Sellers plays at least 3. George C. Scott is so good in this movie. This is a Cold War movie that came out in the middle of the Cold War. And it's a movie about somebody screwing up and hitting the launch buttons. And then a bunch of these politicians trying to smooth it over. Just insanely funny. It's in black and white is the one thing that for some reason some people don't like that about it. Give me a break. Number 2 all-time Joepinionated List movie edition. Greatest Stanley Kubrick movies. He wrote the screenplays, I'm pretty sure, to all of them. Came out in 1968. There's not many directors that are so good at making movies that when astronauts fly to the moon, people would rather believe that Stanley Kubrick made those films because he's the only person in the world that could do it anyways. It was only Stanley Kubrick. They didn't mention anybody else. It was always only Stanley Kubrick. Why? Because only Stanley Kubrick could possibly be capable of doing that. In 1968, Stanley Kubrick released 2001: A Space Odyssey. It was almost 10 years between 2001: A Space Odyssey and Star Wars. Absolutely nothing in those 10 years looked anywhere near as good as 2001: A Space Odyssey. Groundbreaking. Looks real to this day. I don't even know where to start with 2001: A Space Odyssey. You can start at the start, I guess. There's sort of a story to follow. It's more an experience. So just get your popcorn, get comfortable, get your blankie, sit back and just enjoy the experience. Arthur C. Clarke, the opening to the book, 2001: A Space Odyssey, is incredible. He reads it in the life and pictures of Stanley Kubrick. Arthur C. Clarke's a great author. He was really great with his fans. I knew somebody that went and knocked on his door in Sri Lanka and he had tea with him. That was about 20 years ago. This is a kind of movie that to me gets better every time. This guy's got to be an alien. And it can be kind of frightening too. 2001: A Space Odyssey, number 2 all-time Stanley Kubrick movies, Joepinionated List. I recently read the book for the number 1 all-time Joepinionated List, movie edition, Stanley Kubrick Greatest Movies, 1971's A Clockwork Orange. There was me, that is Alex, and me 3 droogs. That's Pete, Georgie, and Dim. We sat in the Korova Milk Bar, trying to make up our Razoo talks on what to do with the evening. Maybe a little ultra-violence, maybe a little Milk Plus, Symptomesque. Basically, the author almost wrote his own language or his own slang. Almost a futuristic movie, or it's almost a futuristic book, and it's about this alternate reality. These gangs of kids that are going out, getting wasted, hurting people, and breaking into people's home. It's not for the faint of heart. It's a pretty intense movie. Sometimes you watch movies and there's people just getting shot up like crazy, and it doesn't mean anything. It's just like, oh yeah, okay, you're just so numb to it because it just happens all the time in these shows. Extremely well shot, extremely well acted. One of the craziest, wildest stories of any story in any movie I've ever seen. Like, this is up there with, this is like Pulp Fiction. It wasn't my first favorite Stanley Kubrick movie. I think I got into Stanley Kubrick because of The Shining. It's become my favorite. And there's all kinds of backstory, history, and stuff like that. And I think that if you want to seek it out, you should. But I think that you should sort of seek out to what their intentions were with this movie. Then you'll see it for what it is. One of the best directed movies, written movies of all time is A Clockwork Orange. Remind you just to like, comment, share, hit that bell, do all that stuff. There's a link in the playlist to all the trailers for these movies that were in the Joepinionated List, so you can just start watching those. They start with Clockwork Orange and work their way down. If you haven't looked into Stanley Kubrick before, I mean, a lot of his movies are rated R, so if you're squeamish or something like that, maybe he's not for you. Check out the life and pictures of Stanley Kubrick. I think it's totally fascinating. I'm sorry I'm a little low on facts and high on opinions. Respect to my favorite director of all time, Stanley Kubrick.